It's my great pleasure to introduce to you again the former Premier of New South Wales and eminent critic, Bob Carr.
Thank you, Greg. Ladies and gentlemen. There are times when we're, as citizens, we've got an obligation to speak out. If the opportunity is missed, we end up regretting it. There aren't many occasions when you can have an impact by going to see your federal member of parliament, but this is one of them. You've got an opportunity to influence whether Australia is going to have a Charter of Rights in one form or another. You've got an opportunity to determine whether we're going to be burdened with religious vilification legislation. I think there's a window of opportunity that may be as short as a month. It gives you the opportunity to make an appointment to see your federal member of parliament and to put your case. I hope with as many people from as many denominations in your federal electoral division as possible, because a delegation of a dozen, 15 or 20 or 25 people has a definite impact on a member of parliament. And I suppose to target your representations most effectively, we're talking about decisions being made in the Labor Party, because the Labor Party is in government, likely to be in government after the next federal elections, and it's likely to be, and therefore it's going to be a Labor government, a Labor cabinet that will determine whether we have a charter or not. Indeed, it was this government that set up an inquiry into the question. So ideally, out of this meeting, it's wonderful that you're here at this meeting, but it's action that follows that counts. Surely it's not too much to ask that on a matter that's important to you, you can go that one step further and ask to see your federal member of parliament with as big a group as you can squeeze into his or her office, and to make the case that you don't think we need a Charter of Rights and we don't need a watered-down backdoor version of a Charter of Rights either, because that's really what we're talking about at this stage. Australia is one of the freest countries in the world. In the debates I've participated in, I've challenged supporters of a charter to nominate areas in which we're deficient. And if we are deficient, if we do fall short of Britain or New Zealand or Canada or the United States, then nominate how that would be rectified by a Charter of Rights. One of the advocates of a Charter of Rights, Susan Ryan, said, we've got to protect the disadvantaged. We can only do that through a Charter of Rights. To which my reply is, America has got a Bill of Rights lodged in its constitution. Can anyone argue that the disadvantaged, that the poor in the United States have been protected by it to the point where they're better off than the poor and the disadvantaged in Australia? They're struggling to get a national health scheme, national health insurance scheme through the Congress. We've taken it for granted under federal Liberal and Labor governments for as long as anyone here can remember. Is anyone suggesting that Indigenous Australians, Aboriginal Australians, with all the problems they face, are less free than Indigenous or Native Americans? In many respects, they've achieved more out of the political process. I think we've got to be sceptical about a Charter of Rights. America had a Bill of Rights from the early 1790s, 1791. And it did nothing about slavery. And then when slavery was abolished in 1865, it did nothing about the lack of voting power for American blacks in the South for another 100 years. A university lecturer pointed that out to me at the University of New South Wales, Political Science 1 in 1965, and it's stuck in my mind ever since. And the Soviet Union, he said, the Soviet Union has got an eloquent statement, had an eloquent statement of rights in Stalin's 1936 constitution, as he was busy executing about 30 million of his fellow Soviet citizens. They yanked from your bed bundled into Lubyanka prison, tortured there before being processed in the Gulag archipelago, the eloquent expression of rights in Stalin's constitution would have had a hollow ring. So here's a proposition. Our rights, our freedoms arise from the ethos of a country, from the spirit of a people, from what de Tocqueville, the great French writer about American democracy in the 19th century, called the habits of the heart. The habits of the heart. And Australian freedoms rest on the fact that we are wedded to parliamentary democracy, and we've never departed from it since the first free elections in New South Wales in 1856 gave us a government that was based on a majority in that parliament up the road. We've never had a military coup. We've never had a mob take over the parliament. When you've lost an election, you've slunk away. You've accepted the people's verdict. Federal and state, every state, it's the ethos of the Australian people. And if a government goes too far, some people say John Howard tried to go too far on industrial relations reforms, the government trespasses on the tolerance of the people and they throw it out. After he was defeated by the people in 1949 by going too far on bank nationalisation, the Labor Prime Minister Ben Chifley said, we've got a system where the people can throw you out and they don't have to give anyone an explanation for why they did it. The sheer beauty of the people changing governments, the sacrament that is polling day in a democracy like ours, is something we should respect to the very marrow of our bones.